For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Just a little bit more of a glimpse into my paranormal normal. Screen memories, weird things I saw, the squirrels. We'll get into that. And this is Wendy's Coffee House. I'm Wendy. I decided I really needed to update some of this stuff in the book. So Talking to Nightlights 2 has been updated and is ready to go for pre-order now on Amazon Kindle. So you can check that out. I'll put the link, I already did, I think, on one of the blogs. And check it out. It's like 160 some pages, so it's not very long, and it's an ebook, so it's reader friendly, tech friendly. And I just wanted to go through and revisit some of the things that I wrote, because when I first wrote this back, actually the very first part of it I did and completed in 2001. Interesting timing. And then I went ahead and published it in paperback form, and that was in 2007. But the time that has passed from all of that has given me a completely different awareness, overview, interpretation, and that's what happens when they tell you that it takes about 10 years to integrate an experience like this, spiritually transformative experience. They're right. And I don't know if you ever completely reconcile it. Because for one thing, when it first happens, there's so much of it that's just beyond your language. You're going through this metamorphosis, and you're in the middle of the metamorphosis and experiencing things that you didn't know were possible, let alone how to put it into words and say, well, I was out of my body and I was one with everything, and I melted and I diminished and I dissolved and I fractionated and okay, yeah, we don't have the words. So that's the problem, trying to go through and write it and realizing, gosh, some of that language is just so darn stiff and stilted. And it still isn't perfect, but it's the way I could just at least go back and get some of it out of my head so I could go forward and start describing other things. What's interesting about this is this whole time period, because it's like the 22222 February thing. It's also, I'm looking at the time that has passed from the time that I wrote it, and then I'm now going back to revisit it. And it's the same time of year. When it first came out, I was writing this at this time of year when I was first channeling and getting the information back in 1998. So that was kind of interesting, too, that this time of year seems to have a magic about it that is a connection, at least for me. That's the way it works. And so doing all of that gave me another idea of, okay, remembering there's certain times of the year where we are more creative, where we are more in tune, in touch with whatever it is, that spirit, that essence that drives us. And then there were some other paranormal things that were going on. And Jack, the dog, he's the one who alerted me to the UFO in the bedroom. When I saw that, and I think that was 2013, when the UFO was in the bedroom. And this thing, I thought, I heard him growl. He's on the corner of the bed, and I thought he was he's very territorial. So a pet peeve is a cat coming near the bed. And I figured, okay, it's the cat. So I opened my eyes just a little bit to spy on him. Well, what I saw was this thing hovering in the corner of the room by the window, and probably, 6 inches from the ceiling. And it's a dinner plate size thing, orb. And it has, on the outer rim, it has light bulbs that I could see, and I called it a Christmas tree. And these are red and green lights. And they looked like they were about maybe 3 inches in diameter, and clear. And just like if you see a Christmas bulb, those clear Christmas bulbs, that's what these look like. They were round. It was mind-boggling because I'm not expecting that. And then when I try to focus on it, because I'm trying to wake myself up and really get some clarity on what I'm looking at, and the minute I started homing in on it, it evaporated. It just made itself invisible. It went through the wall. In this case, it was the window and the mini blinds, and I can see it. I can see the colors shining through the mini blinds, and I know forget it. I'm just going to go back to sleep because this thing's not going to let me go any further with it. It was caught. But there are other things that have happened in my life, and I remember as a kid having this sensation that you would call it paranoia, always having a feeling of someone watching, and understanding later on in life that wasn't necessarily off base, that there were other beings around, not all the same thing and at the same time, but other beings that we don't have the ability sight-wise to get a grasp on or see, unless they want to be seen, some of them. And others, I've been told, we can't see them because they are not in our visual range. And that's that telepathic communication. Well, the other part of the telepathic communication was this thing that Jack was barking at this week, had to do with, I hope I told that whole story. Anyway, had to do with another entity that I had been introduced to. And there have been a couple of times when I was aware of this presence, and I even brought back from the crystal mine down in Mena, Arkansas, a crystal to put in at the base of a tree, because that's basically a way of communicating. All right, that's sending a signal, that's giving a location, and that's how I understand that those crystals are a really good indication when an area has a lot of crystal activity, crystals in the soil, the ground. That's most likely going to be an activity area for Sasquatch, for interdimensionals, for ETs, UFOs. There is something about the crystals that is energizing, and it also delivers information. And again, the language is a problem, because I can't say that whatever we're communicating with, it doesn't require words. It's a knowing. And when they speak to you telepathically, it's just all of a sudden the information is there. I don't have to read anything. I don't have to interpret anything. I don't have to go, have a translator. It's all right there. It's a knowing. And so our way of understanding some of this is really hard to contextualize, to put it in some sort of logical framework, because it isn't that difficult. And anytime we try to express it, then it makes it complicated and takes away some of the meaning, some of the definition, because we've just, taken it into like 2 or 3 times removed from what the actual scenario is. So having these experiences and having the guides give me more insight by putting me in certain circumstances that help me understand what it feels like to go through that experience and why they're telling me that we can't see them. And recently somebody was talking about how the difference in frequency makes it difficult when you're in their presence to hold the connection. And that was one of the things I was told when I had the ET, interdimensional, transdimensional being standing in front of me. I could not see this being, but I felt the energy. And I was told that in order for us to connect, then we had to raise our frequency, our vibration, because it would overwhelm us for them to connect with us and possibly create health issues. And if you have read anything of the literature with people who've had negative encounters with ETs, aliens, transdimensionals, they're out of sync. Sometimes it's just as simply being not the right vibration to be in close proximity to this kind of energy. It's too fast for us. And so there's a lot that goes into this, that in terms of writing and upgrading my story, I'm only at the first part of it. When I did the rewrite, I wanted to keep the integrity of the first story intact so that then I could build on it. Or not, but it just gives me a better, I guess, framework for telling the story and getting it in writing. Now, as I'm doing that, back to the things that were happening, the paranormal, Jack is in the room 3 or 4 times, looking off into a corner or a space and just barking. Barking not like he's afraid, barking like he's saying, I see you, I know you're here, an acknowledgement. So the presence isn't frightening. And at the same time, it is a foreign element. And so he's trying to get our attention. So he stands there on alert and saying, barking, hey, 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 here. And we're just saying, okay, yeah. We know you're here and we can't see you. Well, in the yard, Andy went out and saw at the back of the yard sticks lined up in a row. And then Cassie went out and ran through them. So this isn't the initial form, but it's very similar to what was there. I took a picture. They are lined, and they're all beside each other, like 6 or 7 sticks, about 3 inches between them, and all lined in a row. They don't fall like that from the tree, and the squirrels aren't that creative. Maybe they are where you are. Mine are just busy stealing bird food. But that was one of the things. I had this little, as I was asking, who is trying to contact me? Who is trying to make a connection? And there was something that came up, a show on Sasquatch, and I wasn't really paying any attention. And then this thing in the yard happened. I thought, okay. And more of that has to do with the fact that they have something that the people call mind speak, and we call it telepathy. Mind speak is more like what I experience with the other transdimensionals, interdimensionals, because it's all right there. It isn't linear. And so it's all of a sudden it's coming from within you. You hear it, and sometimes you hear it in a loud voice, so it'll even echo in your, where it feels like it's echoing in your head. Other times it's a smaller voice, and so it's just there. And I got the book Mind Speak by Christopher Noel, and he's basically trying to give you the science of how this works, and other people who've had these experiences, so that you can understand how this works together and how our science might have a way of, in some way, shape, or form, giving it relevance and putting it in one more sense where we can say, yes, this is confirmed by our science. And some of it, we've had things throughout our history happen, and science didn't have to confirm or prove it for it to happen. It's a matter of basically us catching up to what's going on and figuring out how to put some math to the numbers and figure out why it would make sense with our physics and, in our linear framework. But I needed to go back and understand all of that to be able to explain, okay, this is what's happening here right now. And the reminder is to continue working with telepathy, continue working with intuition, continue working outside the box, outside the linear framework, to understand why we might be filled with certain kinds of emotions at certain times and overwhelmed. And this week, that's another part of that, with everything happening in the world. The sadness, all of a sudden, just, wow, what a whammy. And sadness from all different kinds of experiences, from past relationships, from past experiences of being in a place, in a certain area with a certain community, and having all of this stuff then all of a sudden wiped off the face of the earth. There was a place where I grew up. The house is now a field. It is no longer there, and it had been there for years. And knowing that it actually has more relevance to my mom, but it's a sense of all of a sudden that came in out of nowhere, because I wasn't necessarily attached to that space, but it was giving me a context of understanding. And this isn't happening just for me, it's happening all over. And so understanding what these emotions are that are coming in waves from different people in different places. And that's what I've had to learn in terms of working in retail and some of these other spaces, that sometimes I would be overwhelmed with feelings and they weren't mine, but I didn't know it. And all of a sudden you have a mood change and thinking, what the heck happened? 5 minutes ago I was just fine, and all of a sudden I'm hit with this pain or this some kind of a heaviness, a weight. And, it can happen just as easily with joy, but usually the one that really gets my attention is a pain. Like, whoa, you can't walk away from it. All of a sudden it's here and it's stuck in your side. And what the heck, where did that come from? So that's also working with frequency and energy and understanding why we're at a lower level. And so when those interdimensionals or ETs come into our space and say, you need to work on this. This is something that will help you to elevate. And the words I got from the beginning, working with the entity, the energy of the nightlight, was that we had to learn how to let go. And letting go, and this is what I had to wrap my mind around, letting go didn't mean losing. It meant releasing. Instead of holding on to all the old hurts, the wounds, the injuries, the things that you think somebody might have done something to you that shouldn't have happened, letting it go, walking away from it, not owning it, and understanding the more of that we carry, it ends up being baggage. And it keeps us caught up in the drama and in all of the constant churn around us. I love that in the Expanse. There's a term that they use. They call it the churn, when things all of a sudden things take a turn for the different, maybe the worst, maybe the best, but the different, and you're caught up in it. It's like the daily drama. All right. So what happens is when we are caught up in their term, the churn, for me, the daily drama, the hamster wheel. George Carlin used to have that on his webpage. You would go to his webpage, and there was the little, down at the end, in the corner was the hamster wheel going around and around and around. Okay, well, when you get out of that, then you can be aware of things that are happening that sometimes don't fit. One day, I was walking down the street, taking Gracie for a walk. The dog, I now have Cassie, but taking Gracie for a walk, and all of a sudden, I saw squirrels running down this beautiful tree, big, tall tree, probably 40 feet, maybe higher. Anyway, it wasn't supposed to be happening because there were so many squirrels I couldn't count them. And they were running down the tree from somewhere up in the sky, down the tree, and across the street. So I'm like, just, a herd, a bunch of squirrels going from that tree across the street to an area that it's a wishing well. I call it a wishing well. Anyway, it's very picturesque, a little scenic park area, and they are running down the well, going over across the street and down the well. I'm like, what the heck is happening there? Now, going back and understanding with the time shifts that I've had and the different experiences that don't make sense in our linear reality, it was just one of those things where I began to realize I might not have been seeing squirrels. The whole thing might have been just my ability to give it a context, and so I saw what I needed to see. And when you understand screen memories, it means there's something else could have been playing out completely. But the whole thing that I was given to see, squirrels running down a tree across the street and into a wishing well. It made sense and no sense at the same time. The other thing about that was Gracie didn't respond. These are squirrels. Dogs usually acknowledge squirrels, especially a bunch of them like that. I tried to count. I put my hand out, and I could count within my hand with, the palm spread out, with the fingers all spread out, about 20 or so squirrels in that area. And I'm thinking, and of course, there are so many more than that I can't count. And that in itself told me something was going on, that there was no way my mind was going to make sense of it. And so that's the memory I got from that. And it helped for me to read some of the stuff that John Foster posts with his experiences. And it also helped for me to have the experience with Chloe, where she's the cat, the calico cat that I had. She was sitting on a chair in our living room. I'm walking from one room to the other. I had something in mind I was going to go get. I look over at Chloe, and I see her sitting on the back of the chair looking at me. And that moment, I think, oh my gosh, I've got to take a picture because she's wearing this collar, and it looks so cool. The green collar, lime green collar with a pink heart on it. And she's looking at me, and it's just, I think she'll be fabulous in a picture. And by the time I get to the other room, which is about, 10 steps, I realize Chloe has never, ever worn a collar. She did a Houdini every time I put a collar on her. I would find it somewhere tucked away, so she never wore a collar. So here I am immediately thinking she's going to be, it's a beautiful picture. Her collar looks perfect, and she has no collar. I walk back into the room. Of course, Chloe was never in that position. She couldn't have been. The chair, the back of that chair that she was in wasn't even big enough for her to sit on, let alone, crawl up and stand on. And that was one of those things where I realize when I think back at it, all I can get is the image of a Cheshire cat. Are you paying attention kind of moment. And I don't know if it's because I looked and I wasn't supposed to see, or I looked and I was supposed to see, and it gave me something friendly to play with. So this stuff, I just thought, I've really got to add more to these stories. So you understand why I wanted to go ahead and do the Talking to Nightlights 2 as opposed to Talking to Nightlights 1. One's is definitely stilted and stale. However, what I didn't change was the stuff with the channeling sessions, because that information came from the energy, the entities who were speaking to me and my guides. I didn't have to change that. I just had to change the context that I used to try to explain it. And I also added some of the paranormal parts that were, part of that experience happening while this was all going on. There was so much, I can't put it all in one book, because it gave me experiences with, like when my grandmother was dying, I had a dream, and she was in a bed and took her hand against her body, put it on the wall, and there's blood on the wall. And I knew from that dream, the information was that she was checking out. And I knew I had a certain time to be back from where I was at that time to make it for the funeral, to be there. And that this was a transition for me from one part of the country to another. And it all played out exactly that way, because I didn't get the word that she had died until after the dream. And the stuff that went along with that, just the knowing without words, without language, that I needed to be at a certain place at a certain time. My other grandmother, when she died, I was so grief-stricken. It was you just carry it. Your gut just is tight. You feel sick. You feel numb. You feel all sorts of discomfort. And there was a point where I felt her give me a hug. And I think it was about 3 or 4 days after she died. When that happened, it took the pain away. And from that moment on, I felt peace. I felt relief. I knew she was fine. I knew everything was going to be okay. And she also told me the song that she wanted at her funeral. There was a George Strait song called I Only Want to Dance With You. And my grandmother, as a young woman, was a dancer. She loved to dance. She was very, very gifted, and that was something she enjoyed. And so that part of it, and she was also shy, which is the lyrics of that song explain that. And so I had no idea. I found out later on she even managed to go to a George Strait concert with my aunt and made it up and down stair steps when she was also physically having issues with walking. And for George Strait, she made it happen. Anyway, and when I worked in country radio, I also got to go, one of those little meet and greets backstage where the media gets to connect with George. It was, yeah. So anyway, but I had no idea how much that would have been, a part of my grandmother. She would have just absolutely been thrilled at that. I didn't even tell her. So things like that you find out afterwards. But all this other metaphysical stuff that was going on in addition to the channeling, I spent 3 years working at doing the channeling. The first year working just with my aunt. The second year working with women. The third year working with men, so I could tell the difference in the energy between the two. And that was, first getting myself grounded and understanding that when you're channeling, you can stop at all the little curmudgeons. You can get all those little friend or foe little characters who come in and entertain you and the group, whoever you're channeling for. Or you can continue to go up. And the more of that higher level energy that you get access to, the less it becomes entertaining, and it becomes more, or in some senses, it's condescending, because it's giving you a negative perception, and it comes through as very much more egotistical and stuck in some kind of a judgmental type form where you should be doing this and you should be doing that and you're so not worthy. When you get to the higher levels, that isn't what it's about at all. It has more to do with this is the way to go forward. And you always have free will to determine whether you take the advice or not. It's never you need to, you have to, you must, or else. There's never any threat or any condescension. And the first thing when you get to the higher level energies, the mantra there is do no harm. So whatever you do in whatever way you connect, you have to remember your own energy is something you're responsible for. And so you have to account for knowing that whatever you put out comes back to you. That's just the way it works. It's a reflection. And as we're here in the physical body, the stuff that we do, we are building for the next trip around. And that's what I got from these guides was that, this stuff it's just a circle. You go around and around and around, like a merry-go-round. And it depends on, what kind of energy you want to bring to the equation as to what you experience. And you might be here for somebody else this time. It may be that you agreed to do this trip because somebody else was going to need you to help you. And that doesn't mean they're going to be nice to you. It could mean that they're your worst enemy. Because the lesson you ask for is one for either compassion or a wisdom, or you wanted to understand what patience was about, tenacity, winning, losing. All of those things that we experience are in some way, shape, or form translated and transmuted, and we grow from the emotions that they put out. And so, again, saying we carry a lot of baggage makes sense, and letting go has to do with releasing and allowing. We are going to have these emotions. The emotion does not define me. The emotion is for me to work through and understand how it might make someone else feel to carry that emotion as well. And again, going back to what I said before, the way that I look at this is you are magic, you are divine, you are all things possible, and in you all things are possible. We are amazing in our abilities. We have one superpower. The superpower is the imagination. I can imagine myself into anything and out of anything. And that's the whole point of being a creator and working with energy. I wanted to get everything in writing to help me understand and get clarity so I could go forward and let go of some of the things I thought should be more important and should be necessary when I found out they weren't. All of this, when you start dealing with the metaphysics, there are so many opportunities. And then, like when I was talking the Sasquatch thing, I wasn't sure what was happening. But I do have the crystal that says, here it is. And then I also had the experience when they gave me crystals that actually one looks like a little foot. And then I found one to match that also looks like the other foot. So the right and the left foot on these little stones that are crystals. There's no words. But the experience was them getting that mind speak saying, look down, pick up the rock. And me saying, no, I'm not taking anything away from this place. I don't want to, no. And say, look down, pick up the rock. And so it was a gift. And I was saying no. And the third time, the third time's a charm, I finally looked down, looked at the rock, picked it up, and it was a rock, from my viewpoint, when I turned it over, crystals on the bottom, and shaped like a foot. So the interesting thing is, as I'm walking and saying no, I'm continuing to go down the path. And so when I finally decide to stop and pick up a rock, I wasn't where I was when I first said no. Interesting. So this is the kind of stuff that happens when we are intuitively aligned and we trust that we're getting information that will be helpful and that we can learn from. I'm watching every day. I'm watching the news headlines as I do my job, doing traffic reporting. And I do that because for me it's interesting and it's useful. But at the same time, there are other things going on that I really don't totally tune out. And the headlines. So I had to be careful about the kind of headlines that I am surrounded by, because again, a lot of this, it's emotional. Whether you want to get caught up in it or not, the emotions are constantly being stirred by the language that we speak, by the emotions that come along with that, and depending on what you've had in your past history, how you react and reflect to that will be its own thing. So that was the job I could continue to do without being caught up in the churn, the daily drama. And then I see all these stories that don't get the visibility that I think they deserve, that they should deserve. Some of the fun stuff that happens, even though the tragedies going on out there, there's still other things that are under the radar and worth looking at. One of the things that I saw had to do with animals, and how animals are so well programmed that they automatically do things that will help save their environment. And we think we're intelligent, but when it comes to intelligence and longevity and surviving, the fact that animals have the ability to be proactive and work toward saving their environment, preserving their environment, and we don't seem to have that same ability, suggests that maybe there's a different type of intelligence at play, and examining how we might be better served, going back and looking at how long do we think we're going to last here under these circumstances? What are we doing to our environment? So the article, if you're interested, is actually called Animals Have Evolved to Avoid Overexploiting Their Resources. Can Humans Do the Same? And it's on rawstory.com. And they're at our mercy, technically. But then again, maybe they aren't. With these others who are around us, like the Sasquatch, the ETs, the elementals that are here, and the fairies, they're here too. They're here too. And before, I thought it was necessary to tune that out because, well, that's not normal. That's just fantasy. It's fiction. It's delusion. If that's the case, then it sure makes the rest of this stuff incredibly boring. Because the other thing about these delusions, these fantasies, these fictions, is when you do engage them and when you interact, you learn a lot. And sometimes they'll teach you more about your own environment, your own past history, the history of the cosmos, the history of things that we oftentimes don't have a chance to examine because everything's too crowded. We're too distracted. And that's one of the things that when you get into working on focusing, whether you're going to do out of body, you're going to do remote viewing, you're going to be a medium, all that stuff, the first thing you have to do is get a grip of the monkey mind. Start realizing what you're doing to yourself by playing old tapes of, like when I was 5, and then somebody told me, well, you should do this, and you should do that, and you're bad because you did this, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, and those tapes are still playing. Get rid of the tapes. For one thing, you were 5 years old. You hadn't done anything yet. You were just bothering somebody else in their way. And so it wasn't personal, all right? It wasn't personal. It was that was just a way of getting you to redirect and get out of the way. Okay, so none of that stuff that happened is yours. Well, there's a whole lot more along that same line that isn't yours, that you might have integrated and taken on as, oh, I can't do this, because you were told you couldn't. No. Nobody knows until you do. Okay, when you do it, then all that stuff goes out the door. So a lot of this has to do with our mindset, what we're willing to believe and buy into. And when you understand that you have these abilities creatively, intuitively, and in some way, mentally, intellectually, higher level intellect, that psychic intellect, then there's so much more possible. When you change your thoughts, you change your abilities, you change your awareness, you open doors. And then the other thing is to ask for help. How can I see this better? How can I do this better? Ask your guides and give yourself permission to believe the answers are coming. And they are. The other thing in terms of believing is not to block it. Okay, so when you say, well, it might not happen, that's where the belief comes in to say, I allow it. It will be coming. It will be here. It is possible. And that's where that conflict with, if you don't believe it, it can't happen. Well, it can happen. What belief does is it releases the block. I believe it's possible. And you feel your body when you're blocking it. I don't believe it. There's no energy. And so when you're around someone who is a skeptic, remember that energy is there. That block is there. And so to give yourself permission not to buy into the blocks, not to bring that baggage with you, to let go. And it took me a while to understand, to really give a definition. Because when they give me words, when I have language, there's sometimes a really big barrier because of what my understanding of that language, that phrase, that word is may not be what I'm given. It could be that those are the words they have that are in my vocabulary that are available to make a transition. It's up to me to give them the context and the definition. And some words have multiple meanings. So well, when you do spell check, you'll find out, yeah, that's the wrong word. Spelled the same, wrong word. Okay, so those, or sounds like, wrong word. There was another, I saw something, it was a typo in a book, and it was all. It was an I'll, I will, with an accent. All. I'll. A-L-L, okay? Because it was an accent. And so spell check just fixed it. Yep, all. A-L-L. No, it's supposed to be I will. I apostrophe double L. See, that's okay. So this is the transition we have to make when we're talking with our guides and with these other elementals, ETs, whoever who's trying to use our language and getting stuck because of our definitions. So, okay, anyway, I've got a guest coming up, and the guest is Lisa Estabrook, and I wanted to change directions a little bit and go back to some of the information that has to do with elementals, with plants, with some of our natural surroundings. And so what she has is called Soulflower, the Plant Spirit Oracle. All right, so she's writing. It's a 44-card deck, and of course it has a guidebook to go with it. So she's writing and includes the plants, so you can work in a different way. And people do this with shamanism, and sometimes they'll use, medicinals to help. I don't need that. My stuff works pretty psychically and it's outside the box without any enhancements or psychotropics or any of that. Oh, not that, maybe someday, but not now. And I've already had too many mind-boggling experiences that threw me out of this awareness into a completely different reality. No drugs involved. So I trust that's just part of my walk. Okay. So anyway, the guide book, I have that, and I wanted to get that ahead of time so I could practice, and when I talk to her, ask better questions possibly. And so right now I've got 3 cards I'm drawing, just to give you an idea of what it's like. Oop. Ha. Okay, I'm laughing because the nasturtium's on top, but the card I'm picking up is the nettle underneath. If you've ever been around a nettle plant, not the young nettle, but the developed nettle, boy, they sting. The young nettle are edible, and they're not gonna bite you. But boy, the adult nettle is a stinging nettle. Well, that's what this is. All right, so there it is. This is funny. This is okay. I've got 3 cards to go with. The first one is nettle transformation. The stinging thing, yeah, boy, that kind of gets everything going. And there was this morning, I can't remember, I had been asking for an assist and saying, help me understand this, help me work with this energy. I had a buzz. All of a sudden, this like not the strength of a cattle prod, thank you, but it was like something, and here it is, this nettle that reminded me that this morning there was this buzz. I forgot to write it down. Okay. Well, the buzz stayed with me for a few hours because I'm at work and I still have this little buzz. Better than a coffee buzz. Not as bad as a nettle buzz. All right, so transformation. And it says, wake up. It helps you transform foggy thinking so you can respond to prickly or heated situations by speaking up for yourself in alignment with your own truth. Okay, so I'm just, that's the overview. I'm not going to read the whole card. But that's interesting because that's the same kind of energy that I felt, the need to speak up. All right, and then campanula, alignment. Really pretty. I love these flowers. I've seen them, and I could never remember the name, so here I drew it. They're bells, and they're ringing in the spirit of abundance from the limitless universal source, helping you align your thoughts, words, and actions with your true self, which knows no limitations. So as I'm reading this, I want it to work for you too. I am hoping, as you're hearing this, that this also relates to you. If not, there's a whole deck and there are other flowers. Okay? You don't have to be stuck with these 3. And then the third one. I always do 3. That's just for me. It's a good number. resonance. Pansy. I love pansies. These are the purple and yellow. All right? Just remember, purple and yellow. The colors are also important. And so I have the shades here. The nettle is the green, and the campanula, I believe, is another lavender, and this is purple and yellow. Allow the pansy to instill a sense of stability and safety in your heart, to release fear and anxiety, ease into an understanding of your own heart's deepest truth. Okay? So this is, amazingly enough, often called Heartsease pansy, and it's the resonance of your heart. So going with things that work in alignment with you and letting your heart speak. All right? Talking to Nightlights 2 tells the very, very, very beginning of my story working with the Nightlight energy. There's so much that happened since then, but I had to get it in a way that gave me, again, a frame of reference to start with, and to say that no matter how small we think we are, somewhere, somehow, some way, we're each here for a purpose. Anything is possible. I'm open to receive miracles. That changed things for me. Again, the book will be available on pre-order on Kindle, Talking to Nightlights 2. And I'll put links on the blog also here in the description for the show. And the blog, Talking to Nightlights, WordPress. Thanks for listening.